The night clung to the village like a heavy cloak, thick and suffocating, as though even the stars above had chosen to hide their light. A chill wind slithered through the narrow streets, carrying with it the faint creak of wooden shutters and the soft murmur of prayers whispered behind closed doors. At the heart of the square, a crowd had gathered, their faces half hidden in the glow of wavering lanterns, eyes darting nervously at one another. In their midst stood a man tall and broad, his silhouette outlined in the flickering light. His weathered hands clutched a plain wooden box, small enough to be carried, yet burdened with an aura so powerful that none dared to approach him. The crowd shifted uneasily, their breath shallow, as though the mere act of inhaling might awaken something that should have remained undisturbed. The man's expression was one of deep hesitation, his eyes flickering with the weight of unseen choices, and in that moment, every heartbeat seemed amplified, every second stretched thin with suspense. When at last his trembling fingers reached for the lid, the silence became unbearable, thick as stone, until it broke with the sharp creak of wood. The box yawned open, and the world seemed to tilt. Inside lay not riches nor relics, but something far more dangerous, a folded parchment, brittle with time, its surface marked by a symbol that pulled gasps from the crowd. The symbol was no stranger. It was one that haunted bedtime stories and whispered warnings, a mark once feared and long thought buried beneath the dust of forgotten years. Mothers had told their children of it to keep them from straying at night, and elders had spoken of it with lowered voices, as though even the mention of its name might draw its owners back from the shadows. The man lifted the parchment with trembling hands, the crackle of aged paper unnervingly loud in the quiet square. His voice, hoarse but resolute, filled the air as he began to read the words inscribed upon it. "This land," he began, "was built on falsehoods. Those who guided you swore allegiance not to you, but to themselves. Your faith was a veil, and behind it, betrayal thrived." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, faces turned pale, eyes widened in disbelief. For years, doubts had lingered unspoken, yet none had dared to voice them. Now hearing them confirmed in ink from a time long past, the villagers felt as though the ground beneath them had shifted. The man's voice trembled as he continued, his words unearthing secrets that should have remained buried. The parchment told of pacts made in silence, of guardians who had once vowed protection, but had in truth shackled their people with invisible chains. As the truth unfolded, so too did the unease in the villagers' hearts. For revelation is not liberation, it is the birth of fear. No one noticed at first the way the lantern flames began to flicker, trembling violently as though disturbed by an unseen hand. But then came the sound, a sharp crack from the edge of the square, like the snapping of a branch beneath a heavy step. The crowd turned as one, their eyes straining into the darkness beyond the light. The man lowered the parchment, his gaze narrowing, his instincts whispering that they were not alone. A second sound followed, softer, drawn out, as though a deliberate foot pressed against the soil with cruel patience. Panic fluttered in the chests of the villagers, their whispers rising in nervous tremors. "Who's there?" A voice called, old and cracked with fear, but no reply came. The man raised his hand for silence, yet the silence itself became unbearable, amplifying every beat of their hearts. And then, from the thick curtain of night, a figure emerged. Cloaked in shadow, tall and unmoving, the stranger stood just beyond the circle of light, his face hidden, but his presence undeniable. The crowd shrank back, mothers clutching children, men stepping instinctively in front of their families. The man holding the parchment squared his shoulders, his voice strong, though his heart raced. "Show yourself," he demanded. The figure did not move. Instead, a low laugh echoed across the square, deep and chilling, curling through the night like smoke. The laugh was not one of amusement, but of recognition, as though the figure saw not strangers but pieces of a puzzle long anticipated. Slowly, the stranger stepped forward, the lantern light finally illuminating his face. Gasps rippled through the crowd, for it was a face both familiar and foreign, familiar in its resemblance to one who had lived among them years ago, foreign in the darkness etched into its features. His eyes glowed with a strange fire, and his lips curled into a smile that carried no warmth. "So," he said, his voice steady and smooth, "the parchment has found its way back into the light." The villagers recoiled, their fear now tinged with confusion. Who was this man, and how did he know of the parchment? The man holding it tightened his grip, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "You speak as though you have been waiting," he said. The stranger's smile widened. "Waiting? No, watching." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Murmurs erupted once more, confusion and dread intermingling. The stranger's gaze swept across the villagers, his expression one of cruel satisfaction. "For generations you believed in peace, in freedom, in the strength of your guardians. But peace is nothing more than the silence that comes before the storm, and freedom is the sweetest lie." His words cut through the crowd like a blade, and in that instant, every doubt that had been planted by the parchment took root, twisting, darkening, growing into something far more dangerous than suspicion. Fear of the truth itself. The man with the parchment steadied himself, his voice rising above the whispers. "If what you say is true, then speak it plainly. What storm is coming, and who are you to deliver such words?" The stranger's eyes gleamed as he took another step forward, his presence filling the square like a shadow that swallowed all light. "I am no messenger," he replied. "I am the proof." The villagers recoiled as he pulled back his cloak, revealing a mark etched into his flesh, identical to the symbol that crowned the parchment. Cries erupted, some of fear, some of anger, others of denial. The man holding the parchment felt his knees weaken, for the truth was now undeniable. The order, thought long extinct, had not vanished. It had been waiting, silently, biding its time. And now, with the parchment exposed, their return had been announced. The stranger's voice thundered, "You were never free. You lived in chains, woven from lies, and tonight, you will decide whether you will accept the truth or perish in the comfort of your ignorance." His words were not simply spoken, they were a verdict, an ultimatum. The villagers looked to one another, their faces pale with terror, their eyes wide with desperate questions. The silence that followed was more deafening than any cry. The man clutching the parchment knew then that his life, and the lives of all who stood before him, had been forever changed. The crowd trembled in silence, unable to decide whether to flee or to face what had stepped out of the shadows. A child whimpered, clinging to his mother's dress, and that small sound cracked the stillness like glass shattering. The stranger's eyes flicked toward the noise, and his smile deepened, cruel and knowing. The man holding the parchment felt an instinctive urge to shield the boy, but he also knew that a larger truth now weighed heavily upon them all. He steadied his breath, forcing calm into his voice. "If chains bind us, then tonight we will break them, but not by bowing to fear, not by surrendering to shadows." His declaration carried across the square, firm and unyielding, and for the first time, a spark lit in the villagers' eyes, uncertain, flickering, but present. The stranger chuckled, shaking his head slowly. "Bold words," he said softly. "But words do not shatter chains. Words alone cannot stop what is already in motion." His gaze lingered on the parchment. "You have awakened something that cannot be returned to slumber. Choices will be demanded, sacrifices will be made, and none of you are ready." His tone held no anger, no passion, only a chilling certainty that froze the blood of all who heard it. The man lowered his gaze briefly to the parchment, then back to the stranger. "If sacrifices must be made, then we will face them, but we will not face them blind." He lifted the parchment high, its fragile form trembling in his grasp. These words revealed betrayal, yes, but they also reveal a path. A warning given is not a curse, it is a chance. His voice, steady and resolute, echoed through the square, drawing strength from the very fear that had once weakened him. The stranger's expression darkened, the faint smile fading into a mask of cold disdain. He stepped closer, the flames of the lanterns shuddering violently as if recoiling from his presence. "Then let me show you the path you walk so proudly." With a swift motion, he struck the ground with the butt of his staff, and the earth groaned in response. A ripple spread across the square, a vibration felt in the soles of their feet, rising into their bones. Gasps and cries erupted as cracks appeared in the soil, narrow but deep, weaving across the ground like veins of darkness. The villagers staggered back in terror, clutching one another for support. The man held his ground, though his heart pounded like a war drum. The stranger's voice rose, commanding and cruel. "You stand upon hollow ground. Your foundations are weak. And when the truth fully rises, all you thought was solid will crumble." The villagers clutched their children tighter, their breaths shallow, their eyes wild with panic. The air grew heavier, as though invisible hands pressed upon their chests. Yet in the midst of this dread, a voice rose from among them, not one of fear, but of defiance. It was the old woman who had spoken earlier, her eyes sharp and unyielding despite her frail frame. "Enough," she cried, her voice strong as steel. "We have lived too long in fear of shadows, too long under the weight of secrets we never asked for. If chains bind us, then let them break here and now." Her words cut through the chaos, silencing the murmurs, steadying trembling hearts. The stranger turned his gaze toward her, his expression unreadable. "And who are you to speak so boldly?" he asked. She lifted her chin, her voice unwavering. "I am one who has lived long enough to see lies wear thin. I have nothing left to fear." The villagers stared, stunned by her courage, and in that moment, courage spread like wildfire among them. Shoulders straightened, hands unclenched, and for the first time, the crowd did not cower. They stood shaky but together, facing the shadow before them. The man with the parchment felt strength return to his limbs, his resolve hardening. He raised his voice, steady and commanding. "We will not yield. Whatever secrets lie hidden, whatever truths you bring, they do not belong to you alone. They belong to all of us. And together we will face them." The stranger's eyes burned. With fury now, the calm mask shattered, replaced by something raw and dangerous. "Then you choose defiance," he spat, his voice echoing unnaturally. "So be it." With a sweeping motion, he extended his staff toward the sky, and the lantern flames surged upward, exploding into sparks that rained down upon the crowd. Screams erupted, children cried, and the villagers scrambled for cover. Yet through the chaos, the man clutched the parchment tightly, his voice cutting through the panic. "Do not run. Stand firm." His command, resolute and thunderous, halted many in their tracks. They turned back, rallying, gathering around him as though his voice anchored them in the storm. The stranger's fury only deepened, his form seeming to swell with shadows, his presence towering and dreadful. He raised his staff once more, preparing to strike. But before he could, the parchment in the man's hand flared with light, blinding and pure, searing through the darkness like dawn breaking over a long night. The stranger recoiled, a cry of rage tearing from his throat as he shielded his eyes. The villagers gasped, awe and fear mingling, as the parchment's glow spread outward, wrapping around them like a shield. The man's voice, strengthened by something beyond himself, rang clear. "This is not the end of us. This is the beginning." His words resounded, not just in their ears but in their hearts, filling them with a strength they had thought lost. The light grew brighter, pushing back the shadows, forcing the stranger to stumble, his form flickering as though unraveling. His voice, once so commanding, now cracked with fury. "You cannot stop what is coming." You cannot undo centuries with hope alone. Yet even as he roared, his form dissolved further, his presence fading against the brilliance of the parchments. Light! The villagers watched in stunned silence, as with one final scream of rage, the stranger was consumed by the glow, vanishing into the night from which he had come. The square fell silent once more, the only sound the ragged breathing of those who had endured. The parchment's glow dimmed, settling back into fragile ink and paper, but its power lingered. A memory etched into their very souls. The villagers stood in stunned silence, their fear mingled now with wonder. Slowly, one by one, they turned their gaze to the man who held the parchment. His chest rose and fell heavily, his face pale with exhaustion, but his eyes burned with determination. "We are not the same as we were," he said softly, yet his words carried across the square. "We have seen the truth. And though it frightens us, though it shakes the ground beneath our feet, it is ours. We must carry it, not hide from it. For only by facing what has been hidden can we shape what lies ahead." The old woman nodded, her face lined with both weariness and pride. "Then let this night be remembered," she declared, "not as the night shadows tried to reclaim us, but as the night we stood together, unbroken." The villagers murmured in agreement, voices low but growing with strength. Hope flickered in their eyes, fragile but alive, like the first flame kindled after darkness. The man folded the parchment carefully, holding it to his chest as though it were both a burden and a gift. He knew the road ahead would be fraught with trials, that shadows do not vanish simply because light has touched them. But he also knew that something had awakened in his people, a unity that could not be so easily extinguished. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, spilling its soft glow across the square, the villagers dispersed slowly, their steps heavy but steady. The man remained for a moment longer, standing in the fading glow of the lanterns, the parchment secure in his hands. He looked out over the village, the rooftops glistening in the pale morning light, and felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. He knew that what had begun tonight would not end easily. Shadows still lingered, waiting, watching. But now they would not be met with silence and submission. They would be met with voices united, with courage drawn not from one, but from many. He turned, walking slowly toward his home, the parchment pressed against his heart. Behind him, the square lay quiet, but it was no longer the same place. It had become a witness, a sacred ground where truth was spoken and fear was faced. And though the memory of the stranger's words lingered, so too did the glow of defiance that had risen against him. The story was not over. It was only just beginning. And as the old saying went, dawn always breaks darkest before the light.